Got some real data, which is fantastic, from Halifax, and it shows the house prices in the United Kingdom. But there's a lot of data, as we can see, lots and lots and lots, and it's all by different counties. And we want to try and get a model for this data. So we're going to need quite a few Excel skills, and then we're going to use Autograph also. So the first thing I might do is highlight all the columns and get some filters on here so that I can start to make sense of it. And I don't want 12 different bits of data for 1983 or however many bits for all the different regions. So in here I'm just going to put a filter on straight away, and I'm going to say I'm only going to look at, being as we're in Stoke-on-Trent, the northwest. So I'm going to just filter out for the northwest. And then I'm going to say, well, that apparently house prices, which is interesting, get more expensive towards the summer. So I'm only going to go for the house prices in quarter 2. I'm going to take that as an average, roughly. Or I could take, if the students wanted to take the time, we could take the average of each set and repeat that formula for each year. So there's 4 quarters in each year, and I could repeat that average for each year. I think it's going to be a bit faster to say, okay, I'm going to take quarter 2 as a rough average just to get an initial model. So that's quarter 2. Great, and so now we've got the data as we want it. I've just got one piece of data from each year for the northwest, and I just want the 2 lines of data that I'm interested in. And so I'm just going to copy them, paste those. I like to paste it into a new page just to check I've got everything as I want it. All the way down to 2003 there, so 13, sorry, just going to copy that, and I'm going to create a new page. Paste it in, and I'm going to do the same with, obviously, the price data. And again, if I just click on the first cell that I want, and then hold down the Shift key, and go to the top of that list, I think it's the quickest way to select the data you want precisely. I'm just going to copy that. And again, just going to paste that next door. Great, so now I've got my house price and year data. Just going to go to the end and select all that data and paste it into my Autograph sheet. And as what typically happens, that's why I like this data set, this is called out house prices. Oh my goodness, what's happened to the house prices? Not going anymore, maybe it's just a mistake. Okay, well, I go back. Let's see if I can enter in the house prices. So I just copy the house prices. And even then, it's not going to work. And the reason it's not going to work is they've used these commas to divide the numbers, and that won't paste into Autograph's XY dataset. So if we highlight the whole column, and to get rid of that comma, right-click and format cells, and we're just going to say the number, we don't want this comma as a separator that they've used, we don't need any decimal places, and that's great. So now we should be able to copy and paste that into Autograph, no problem. So we're going to do that, Shift hold down the keyboard, right click and copy the whole lot, Control C, and data, enter XY dataset, paste it in, rename the house price, and you see this time, no problems. There's always little niggles that's really good to have experience of, because it's going to happen to your students. Okay, horrendous. Can't see very much happening there. So then I could change the scale, and so we're going to do that. And we know the house prices. Another useful couple of functions is if you use max, and you can get that data. I think it goes B1 to B31 from our shift earlier. You can see the column number ends at B31. That will tell us the maximum value in there, and the minimum value in B1 to B31, and that will tell me the minimum value. So I need to go from about 25,000 to 155,000. Great, so on here I can say, look, we need to go from edit axes, on the y-axis about £25,000 all the way up to 155,000. And these years, we only started in 1983 and we only go up to 2013, so let's just go a bit above and beyond. Great, now we've got a pattern, super. So then we want to model, because this is all about modelling. And then we encounter the next difficulty. What if I thought that might be an exponential model? You know, I'm a student, all these bumps, I don't want to handle those. A little challenge for you all is to see if you can find a function using A-level functions, not or IB functions, but not using the polynomials. Makes it perhaps outside of the theoretical domain of students. So I'm going to try and find a model for that. So I might think it's an exponential, so y equals, I'm going to put lots of constants in here, e to the power of bx minus c. I might just keep it simple to begin with, e to the power of ex plus d. Okay, so call that house price. I can't see my model. Why is that? Great discussion. Yeah, well, absolutely. If you start raising e to the power of 2000, it's a horrendously big number. And again, another problem students will come into. Nothing's happened, can't find it. So we need to adapt our data really, and ideally we're going to scale the years so it goes from 1 to 31. So that's what we're going to do. And then we might want to try and scale this as well, so that those numbers are more in the domains of the 50s. So I'm going to leave that maximum there. I'm going to call 1983, I'm going to call that year 1. That's the first year of our data. And then I'm just going to add 1 to that and paste it all the way down. And when I've got columns either side, if you just double click when it's a black cross in the right hand corner, that will paste it all the way down. Great, so that's pasted it all the way down. Super, yeah, just see that to check. And then same for this data, I'd rather not, I'm going to move my max and min out of the way, they were helpful, but let's just move those out of the way. Max, price, min price, just so we remember what they were. And then we're going to just quickly scale this data too. So I can go use a round function in Excel, so I don't really need to know that much data precision. And a bit unusually, again, this data goes from, you can either scroll down or just type it in if you want to do, so I'm going to hold down the shift key again and select that last one. And I want to round all of these numbers, I think to the nearest 1,000 is going to be sufficient. So unusually, if it's numbers, not unusually because left is negative and right is positive, I want to round numbers in Excel to whole numbers. I need to count negative numbers because I'm going to the left of the decimal, and how many places I want to go. So I want to go to the 3 because I want it into the thousands column. So minus 3 for the thousands, so it's 3 zeros. And great, so now that's rounded it, and again if I just double click here, it will round it all the way down. And then I'm going to scale that, so I'm going to divide it all by 1,000, so that it makes it easier to model, so students aren't having to deal with those horrendously large numbers and having all the issues that go with that. Great, and now I've got my data, and I'm going to paste this new data in, and that should be a bit easier to model. And the last thing we're going to talk about is using a piecewise function, because we can see there's a number of stages to this model. So we're going to change that data. I'm just going to double click on it, and I'm going to paste over the top of it the new data, and then go back because it didn't accept the double selection, and shift click to get the whole lot, and paste that into the other column. Great, and now we've got our data ready to work with. Okay, it's a bit more manageable. We're going to have to change our scale back. And now we've got the x's that just go from 0 to 32, and the y's are still 25,000 to 155,000, but we've rounded and scaled them, so it's going to be 25 to 155. And then we get the data back as it looks. Now, for this data, it's quite hard to see what that might be, so if I just get rid of my model for now. And it could divide into sections, and probably there's one section. Here's the end of the next section, and then there's this section here. So it's kind of like this graph has 3 sections. And I might, very roughly, I might say that looks a bit like a quadratic, this one looks like a bit like a cubic, and again, this one looks a bit like a, let's say, a linear function. So I'm going to enter 3 different functions, but I need to know what their domain is. So if I hold down the control key in Autograph, I can click, I think that's the end of the first sort of pattern. And if you look down the bottom here, and if I go View and Results Box, it comes up at the top over on this side also. And the status box is probably the even better one, so I go View and Status Box, and there it is. So it tells me it goes up to the 9th year. Great, so I'm going to do a piecewise function up to 9. And then I'm going to do a cubic function, same thing, I'm going to hold down the control key. I think it ends about here, this pattern. And again, if I just have a look at that in the status box, that finishes at 26, so that is going up to 26. And then obviously the last one goes all the way to the end there. So now I know the boundaries which I want to set my piecewise function. I just set it in the different equations. So I think the first one might be a quadratic, and I've prepared this early just to show you. So I've gone for the first section being quadratic, the second section being a sine, and the last section being a linear. And you see I've put a comma in there. It's really important. I've put a comma in there to separate each of those functions. And I've used letters. Be careful, you can't use E, you can't use F, you should avoid G because that can sometimes be a function. Letters, all the letters here are valid and L-sharp as constants in my constant controller when I want to adjust them. And then the startup options, I need to say what those boundaries are, so that see it reminds you of the left limits and your final limit. Well, my left limits starts at 0, the next one begins at 10, this one that I'm going to use a trig sort of function to model, and then the next one starts at 27, we said, so 27, and they all finish at 31 because there's 31 years in this data. Okay, and you see I've got the three different models there. The trig function's off the page, so it's probably because I need to then look at bringing that up. Again, a nice point of conversation with students, so I can just go axes and show key, and I can double click on that. It's the D and the H's, fantastic. I could also right click on these, on the box, on the functions, and just display the text box, so that on my screen I've got all the different parameters and what they correspond to, because there's a lot to try and remember there. Fantastic. And I want to then vary the D's, vary the M's, vary the P's to try and get that model to fit. I'll leave you to have a bit of fun trying that and to get to grips with it. Best of luck.